Hi, I'm Andrea Lyon, and I'm going to be doing my presentation on AFOs, or animal feeding operations, and CAFOs, confined animal feeding operations, and the way that they're monitored and implemented by the EPA in the United States. So just a quick introduction to AFOs and what they are. The EPA defines an AFO, or an animal feeding operation, as an agricultural operation where animals are kept and raised in confined situations. Obviously, that's kind of a wide definition, so some more specifics on it is that animals must be confined and fed or maintained for a total of 45 days out of the 12-month year, and crops, vegetation, or forage growth are not sustained in the normal growing system within any area of the facility. So that's what it needs to fall under in order to be categorized as an AFO, or a CAFO, confined animal feeding operation, which are essentially the same thing. The most important program when it comes to this type of feeding operation and part of food policy in the United States is the NPDES program, and any AFO that falls under that guideline must be legally regulated by this permitting program that was established by the EPA. So NPDES stands for National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. So the goal of this program is to limit water pollution by regulating point sources that discharge any pollutants into U.S. water sources. The actions that this program specifically takes in order to limit pollution, they create and monitor regulatory procedures and permits. So this kind of ties into the Clean Water Act, which we talked about a lot throughout the semester. This permitting program was created as a part of the Clean Water Act of 1972. Some addendums have been added onto it just in order to delineate some more specifics of like updates over the years. But the CWA defines all animal feeding operations as point sources for water pollution, so they must be monitored in order to make sure that there's not an excess amount of pollutants being put into the U.S. water systems. CAFOs can contribute a lot of pollutants through manure and runoff and other wastewater that can potentially come into contact with our surface water. Some of the pollutants could be nitrogen, phosphorus, organic matter, hormones, and pathogens that are very harmful to human life. Some of the program or policy updates that I spoke about are nutrient management plan requirements and strict waste management plan requirements. There also must be time periods added on for public review and comment. The next point that I'm going to talk about this specific policy is the methods and enforcement, which is obviously very important to make sure that it's effective. On the left, I put a graph that I found on the EPA website that shows the amount of EPA inspections on CAFOs throughout the last couple fiscal years. The one on the right is pretty similar, but it's more about enforcement actions for violations. So that could be, if they're violating very specific things that the NPDES requires them to add in every single year. So the EPA makes sure that CAFO leaders are following the permit rules each year by annual implementation summary reports, annual CAFO water collection and monitoring, so it's a pretty hands-on process. They just make sure that there's no high pollution levels in the water. Cooperation with local boards of health, because these boards of health would be getting all of the specific complaints from people living in the area if there was too much runoff or other things like that, or if it was a disturbance to the area in general. Enforcement actions could be anything from fines or updated requirements to the facility. So, as we talked about in class, the EPA budget has majorly decreased in the past couple of years. CAFO inspection frequency has majorly decreased as well as the staff and amount of scientists in the EPA has decreased, which makes sense. There's just less people to do the work. So the total inspections performed by the EPA in all of their programs, not just their animal feeding operation programs, but everything overall, have been cut to about 1/3 of the levels that they were at in 2012. So obviously there's less staff, less scientists to monitor pollution levels, makes a major hit in the overall goal of not just the CAFO program, but any other program in general. At the bottom here, I just put a graph kind of, showing the major budget cuts that were made to the EPA by President Trump. Obviously, it's not the priority for the administration, so There's been a lot of cuts made, and this trickles down at every level of the EPA. The National Risk Management Research Library is working to kind of like update and adapt these budget cuts through technological pollution monitoring. However, CAFOs and feedlots are a pretty hands-on monitoring process, so it's really hard to monitor them through any kind of like technological update. So I think they're currently still trying to work on it, but there hasn't been enough. And lastly, I'm going to talk about the effectiveness of just kind of the overall program on AFOs. If properly monitored and implemented, as I spoke about, it has not been able to be properly monitored just because of the budget cuts. I think that this program could make a lot of positive changes and decrease pollution levels way more than it's been able to in the previous years, just because they don't have as many people to put their hands on the problem. But if it reached its full potential, it could be way more effective in limiting pollutants from CAFOs in the US. Obviously, livestock produces at least, like one cow produces 3 times more manure than the average human. So this is a huge problem. They're contributing a lot of chemicals and obviously contributing to climate change a lot. So under Congress, the goal and the purpose of the EPA is to protect the nation's land, air, and water resources. This program really aligns with that goal and mission. So definitely could use some more budget to this area. And then I put my sources at the end to Professor Van Vechten. If you need it formatted differently, I can change it. I just put the links and the names of the websites, but I can add more. And I'll put a link to this presentation in my Moodle upload as well.